Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this Saw franchise movie review video. As part of my current series, where I'm taking a look at the entire Saw franchise, all nine movies, plus a ranking video at the end of the month, in preparation for Saw X coming out in October. I've watched and reviewed the first three movies. Those are up on my channel if you want to check out the reviews. Today, we're going to take a look at Saw 4 from 2007. Once again, as they all will be, well, all except the last one, number nine, Spiral, are all part of this eight film collection DVD Blu-rays. So Saw 4 is no exception. So, like the rest of these will be, this was a first time watch for me. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So Saw 4 is a 2007 horror film directed by Darren Lynn Bousman. Again, he's directed the last he's directed two, three, and four, and then I think he came back for Spiral. So, but this is the last one that he directed of this until Part Nine. So it's directed by Darren Lynn Bousman from a screenplay by Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan, and a story by Melton and Dunstan and Thomas Fenton. It is the fourth installment in the Saw film series and a sequel to 2006's Saw 3. The film picks up where the previous film left off with the death of John Kramer. However, it is revealed that John had planned for his death and left behind a series of recordings and clues that would lead investigators to his final game. As the detectives try to unravel the mystery of John's final game, they are drawn into a web of deceit and deception that reveals the true motives behind the twisted games. An autopsy of the Jigsaw Killer reveals a wax coated microcassette in his stomach. This is how the movie opens. The tape promises that the games have just begun. In a mausoleum, Trevor and Art are chained to a large device. Trevor's eyes have been sewn shut, and Art's mouth has been sewn shut, making communication between them impossible. When the device begins pulling them together, they panic and Art kills Trevor to retrieve a key from his collar. Meanwhile, the police discover the remains of Detective Carey. After cautioning Officer Rigg for barging through an unsecured door, Detective Hoffman is introduced to FBI agents Strom and Perez, who deduce that Amanda, Jigsaw's apprentice, would have needed assistance with Carey's death, indicating that there is another apprentice. So yeah, that's the setup and the premise for Saw 4 from 2007. As far as the cast goes, we have Tobin Bell as Jigsaw slash John Kramer, Costas Mandalore as Detective Hoffman, Scott Peterson as Agent Strom, Betsy Russell as Jill, Lyric Bent as Rig, Athena Karkanis as Agent Perez, Justin Lewis as Art, Donnie Wahlberg as Eric Matthews, and Angus McFadden as Jeff. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for Saw 4 from 2007. Um, I mentioned that I thought Saw 3 was a step down from the first two, just a bit of a step down. This one's definitely more of a like a full foot step down, not just a bit from the first three Saw movies. That being said, it's not unwatchable. I don't hate it. There's just a lot going on in this movie, and in my opinion, too much. But we'll get into it with my pros and cons, starting with the pros. And you got to start with Tobin Bell once again as John slash Jigsaw. He's as great as always in this movie. Mostly see him on screen in flashbacks in this movie, other than the initial autopsy that opens up the film. But of course, he's dead in that scene. At least his character is. But he gives a really strong performance once again that helps not only explain Jigsaw's thought process, but also his motivations that lead him to become Jigsaw. So I thought a lot of that was interesting, and really his performance and just him owning this character is what it's all about here as far as his pro goes. I thought the opening scene with John's autopsy was really good. It was very real and effective. Great. This movie has great practical gore effects in terms of what it might really look like if they knocked Tobin Bell out and cut into the back of his head. It didn't look like a dummy or something. It looked like real life, almost too real in some ways when I was watching it. But yeah, I thought that opening scene was pretty effective. And it also tied back to Saw 3 and the surgery that John had through that doctor that they kidnapped. So there's a good consistency there. But yeah, that scene was really effective. I kind of enjoyed and was mostly there's like three different storylines going on in this movie, which I'll get into in my cons. But one of them I kind of liked and was engaged in, and that was sort of the backstory of John Kramer. aka Jigsaw, eventually with his ex-wife, how she fits into it, their journey together, and what happens, and how he becomes Jigsaw. I was kind of interested in that, although it does remove a certain mystery aspect. Once again, as I mentioned in the last movie, as these go on, they take away more of the mystery from the first couple movies. Um, but of the three stories going on, that was the one that I was definitely the most engaged in, I guess, if you want to say. I thought it was interesting. I thought the editing was really effective in this movie, and I haven't mentioned the editing in the other movies. I mean, it's pretty good. Although I'm not a big fan of like when the trap scenes happen and the death scenes, you get that really shaky, fast cuts. I'm not always a fan of that. That kind of becomes a staple of these movies. Um, I mean, it's kind of a mixed aspect, I would say. But as far as the editing in this movie, I thought it was really clever how they would go from one scene to another, like somebody closing the door in one scene would open it to another scene. That kind of editing I find really interesting and really cool. So yeah, I definitely have to shout out the editing in this movie. I thought it was really well done, even more so than the previous three movies. The traps once again are pretty interesting and effective. Not as good as the traps in part three for sure, but I thought they were still on par with like the second movie, and I thought there was some interesting and new unique traps, especially the scalper trap that this prostitute is in, as well as this sort of eye gouger limb remover trap that's attached to this bed that uh, this one character is attached to, basically. So yeah, I thought the traps were pretty solid. Once again, like I said, not as good as part three. So there's a couple of final twists in this movie. One of them didn't work for me at all. The other one that I'll speak to now in my pros did. And I thought it got me. I mean, it really caught me off guard, and I thought it was pretty effective because of that. And I'm talking about the twist that's more related to the timeline, more related to time and space than a character. Um, there's a twist about who the apprentice is that I mentioned in my opening premise of the movie. That one didn't work for me, but the other sort of twist at the end of this movie has to do with when this movie takes place, and that got me. That was effective, I thought, and really interesting, really clever and smart. So I have to shout that out. And then my final pro is I thought Lyric Band, who played Rick, did a really solid job acting in this movie, given the fact that his character is definitely more of a central focus in this movie. We saw him in the first couple movies, but he's really more of a side character, didn't have a lot of screen time. This movie definitely focuses upon his character in the movie more than the previous ones did. And I also thought one scene that really stood out to me in his performance was I thought he had a very realistic response to Carrie's death, who was his partner, of course, towards at the beginning of the movie when they discover her corpse. Of course, she got her ribs pulled apart in the third movie in a trap, and he actually acted like a real person would act, not what we often see in movies. So I have to give him a shout out for that. I didn't necessarily love his character, the motivations of why he was where he was in this movie, but I thought Lyric Ben's performance as this character was really good, especially for taking center stage when he hadn't been in the previous movies. So yeah, those are my pros for Saw 4 from 2007. Now getting into the cons, or the things that didn't work for me. There's just too much going on in this movie, frankly. I thought the first three movies, they gave you stuff that was going on, and it was, there were always a couple different things happening, different stories, like a B story and A story, but it didn't feel as jumbled as this movie does. You have three different storylines going on here, trying to follow everything in a 95-minute runtime. This movie actually needed to be like Saw 3, which I mentioned in my review was a bit long, I thought. 108 minutes. This one was 95 minutes. This is the movie that probably needed to be 108 minutes, and the other one 95 minutes. As a result, this movie just didn't have good pacing or cohesive, flushed out narrative the way the previous movies did, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. There's just they crammed too much in this movie, and I think they either needed to make a longer runtime or take one of those storylines and put it into a different movie or something. Um, then we'll talk about the other ending twist, the one that didn't work for me, and that's the reveal of the apprentice, other apprentice that must have helped Amanda get Carrie up there. Yeah, I knew who it was 10 minutes into the film, and that's not great writing. That's not great character arc there. The ending twist of the accomplice was not effective at all as a result. But more the writing I mentioned, but more sort of the portrayal and the obvious cues given by the actor playing the character were not at all effective. I don't know Costas Mandylor all that well, who plays this character. I guess I just gave away a spoiler there, but the actor didn't do a good job, in my opinion, when you're trying to play sort of um, a mysterious character that you're not supposed to give away exactly who you are or what you're up to until the last couple scenes of the movie. That didn't work for me at all. And like I said, I knew this character was the accomplice about 10 minutes into the movie, so that was a big letdown. I wasn't at all that interested or engaged in most of the characters in this movie, which there were way too many to begin with these three storylines going on. And some characters from previous movies that come back, some new characters are introduced in this movie, and they're not. Sometimes that works in movies and sequels. Dream Warriors is a good example, but in this movie, there's just too much, and it's not woven very well, in my opinion. Um, I just didn't really care about any of these characters for the most part. But I felt nothing for him at the end of the day. And speaking to that, I think the movie's definitely missing James Wan and Lee Winnell's writing, producing, and just overall involvement in these movies. There's not really a lot of big scares anymore. Missing James Wan. The writing isn't as tight in this movie. Missing Lee Winnell. So that's something that really stood out to me, especially when I read that this was the first Saw movie that neither one of them were really involved in. Also, I have to say the reason for Riggs is the character of Riggs, who I mentioned the actor did a good job, but I wasn't really sold on why the character was involved the way he was in this movie. And it's because the reason for him being tested is really weak. Kicking indoors too soon, really? That's what we're going with now in the fourth movie in this franchise? I don't know, man. That didn't work for me at all. So it was hard for me to get behind his character, the motivations there of the apprentice and of Jigsaw initially to even have him in this game. I think of the four movies so far, it was the weakest reason of the character that's playing the game. The wash rinse repeat of Saw is kind of starting to wear thin with me, especially with the setups and premises losing steam. That's the biggest problem with this movie. It was okay, the whole sort of, you know what to expect from a Saw movie when you had a strong premise or characters that you cared about, or the traps or the game was set up effectively, but none of that really happens in this movie, in my opinion. It's really the first time. And as a result, I felt more of the wash, rinse, repeat of the sort of Saw narrative that goes on in all these movies. Not it's like I said, the setups and the premises not being as strong as the previous movies really made me feel that more. So, and then my final con, I'm just throwing in, is there's some CGI blood that's used at the beginning of this movie when we get the two in the mausoleum, Trevor and Art, who are chained to that large device, and there's some blood that comes out of somebody's mouth, and they clearly there's some CGI involvement there, and I don't know why. I mean, Saw was at its best when they use practical gore effects like they do with earlier in this movie, even the very first scene with Jigsaw's head, as I mentioned, is at the autopsy. But yeah, that CGI blood, it's not a huge con, but I had to throw it in there because if you follow my channel and my reviews, you know that I'm like the least fan of CGI, the least biggest fan, I should say. So yeah, but basically, that's all I've got for this movie. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. I mean, I could put this on and watch it again, and I think I probably will, just to see how the movie plays out, having kind of knowing where it's going and who the characters are and what the ending's going to be. But it's definitely a step down from the first three for me for the reasons that I gave, and I'm going to give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. I was between a 6.5 and a 7. But I think I'm going to go with 6.5. It's coming off the first three movies. There's just not enough here for me to have it rated any higher than that. So it's not, like I said, it's okay. It's watchable. It's not awful. But 6.5 out of 10 for Saw 4 from 2007. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of Saw 4 from 2007. Do you like it more than I do, less than I do? Why not? Comment down below. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below as well so you don't miss any of my great horror content. not only the rest of this series, but what I have coming up the rest of the year here for 2023. So hope you're enjoying this review series, especially if you're big Saw fans, or even if you're not. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Hope everybody's doing well here, and but of course, stay scared. Bye.